Hi everyone, so happy to see you here. Welcome to Invincible Innovation Live. I'm Mazor, Kario, Innovation and Value Creation Expert, and I'll be your host. And today with me, I'm so happy to have Frank Long.
Hi,
Hey.
guys. Hi, Eddie. Good to see you
Hey,
again.
good to see you, co-owner and director at fronted.com, right?
Absolutely correct.
So tell us a bit about your background in innovation. So let's start from there.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's great to see you again, and thanks for having me on, Eddie. The last time we met, you were sitting in my studio in Dublin.
Right, right.
Um,
I was so nervous. I have to tell you, when I came to Dublin, I was supposed to give to talk in a big conference, and I was a bit worried that I wouldn't understand your accent, but it was just fine. I was very
okay.
happy to meet you this way.
But I hope you haven't forgotten how to understand our accents since.
No,
But
no, just fine.
a lot has changed since then.
Right, right,
So now we're living in this new COVID-19 reality. So my
right.
background is as a designer. I studied product design a long time ago and worked as a product designer for LG Electronics for a number of years. I designed consumer products like TVs, microwave ovens, that kind of thing, and it was purely aesthetics. So we used to get briefs from Korea, and they would come purely all written in Korean text, and we would just be told, make it look nice. But what does this button do? You don't worry about that. Just make it look nice, you know.
Yeah,
So it's kind of ironic that I then ended up working as a user experience designer,
right.
where we kind of turned everything on its head and we started thinking purely about how do things work? How do people intuitively understand things? How do they want them to work? You know, what are the real deeper needs beyond aesthetic? You know,
Yeah.
and so that really happened with frontend.com. So we started frontend in 1998 as
Wow.
yeah, it makes us, you know, one of the oldest user experience consultancies in the world. I think, you know, we're definitely one of the first in Europe. And starting in 1998, the internet was really just kind of, you know, emerging. A lot of the websites that were online were really you know, they were taking all of their design cues from printed brochures and from the graphic design world, but really terrible to use in reality. And you got to remember as well that bandwidth was tiny back then. So
Yeah,
pages would just take forever to load, you know, watching
yeah,
this
yeah.
big graphic splash screen.
And
Every website had a front cover, you
yeah,
know.
and the router like and it's
Yeah,
got
the
like a
modem,
stack.
yeah, bing,
Yeah.
bing, all that kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah,
So,
and
you know,
it means that we are an adults. That's what that means.
we are old before our time, Eddie. But so we started looking at ways and how can we improve this medium? How can we design things that work, you know, for the digital world? And you know, we also recognized, I think, that the world of the web was not just going to be about websites, but it was going to be about delivering services and accessing services and doing your online banking, doing your shopping, you know, and then it obviously progressed into software solutions and more recently apps and all of that kind of thing. So being first can sometimes be a good thing. Obviously, we were first in the market, so we got some great opportunities in the early days to work with lots of new emerging technologies. So, I mean, way back in 1999, we did the first internet banking system for Barclays. Around about the same time, we worked on the first digital TV platform for UPC in the Netherlands. And so even like clients from countries around Europe started to come to us in Dublin to look at their projects and to help them, which is great because our business now is about 60% international, and then the rest is domestic to the Irish market. And that helps us at times like this in a way that, like, you know, we
Sure.
have this kind of broad base. But I suppose core to what we do in front end is user centered. We're a user centered design consultancy. We define problems from a user's perspective, and then we try to solve those problems and deliver user-centered solutions that are more intuitive, more engaging, and more satisfying to use.
Sure.
So that's core to our philosophy as a design consultancy.
Yeah, and I think that the innovation world is catching up with what we know about design for so many years with tech, and in companies who want to innovate just have to perceive their clients and the users as the focal point. They cannot do it like in the end, doing everything and just making it pretty in the end, because clients know what they want and the competition is hard. So they need to think about it all through the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so much these days is instant gratification. Instant addiction to services, to products. Users won't give you very much leeway if you don't grab their attention quickly, and if you don't deliver value quickly, they will move on and they'll find another competitor's product that does the job better.
Yeah, especially in B2C. In B2B, you have a bit like you can have more buffer about that, but in B2C, no way, it will not work.
Yeah.
So what's the biggest challenge you think innovation leaders face today?
Well, if you asked me that a year ago, I'd definitely give you a different answer that I'm going to give you. But right now, I mean, from our perspective, I mean, I see innovation. There's two sides to innovation. There's understanding problems and there's delivering solutions, and it is very much aligned with the design process as well. Both of these are now much more challenging than they ever have been before. If you think of it from the understanding problem side of the statement, our process would normally involve a lot of time with customers. So when a company would come to us with a design problem, our first goal is usually, let's define this problem more accurately. And to do that, we listen to customers, we listen to the business stakeholders, we spend time on the ground, watching people, observing people, looking at the environment, understanding how the product is sold, how it's used, how it's consumed. And all of that requires things like research, field trips, contextual inquiries. All of those tools are now beyond a lot of our
it's
scope,
all virtual,
right?
so it's like
So we're trying to do things in a virtual world now, which is less good. Let me tell you.
yeah
Let me give you a quick example. I mean, we're working on a project at the moment, and it's a piece of software. It's for streamlining the production environment. So if you imagine these production lines in factories, around the world, you have all these users who are working on these lines, doing individual tasks, and components arriving at just the right amount of time, and everything is being scanned and put together, and they're following instructions on screens and things like that. Last year, when we started working on this project, we had a team of designers like visiting places in Hungary and Poland and Canada, and they're in the plant. They're watching the people do their job. They're having chats with them. They're listening to the issues and to the pain points they have. They're even eating lunch in the canteen, in the staff canteen with these people,
Right.
Now all of that has been condensed into a Zoom call, with their supervisor. It's not the same, There's
with
no
the
way
supervisor.
with
That's
the
not good.
supervisor, because these guys are too busy doing their jobs to be coming in individually, and they just wouldn't be feasible, from a logistics point of view. So it's much more challenging to kind of understand the problem from the user's perspective, and it kind of reduces the empathy that you have for the end user. And I think empathy is core part of what we do. The second challenge then is the remote working element. Now, like we're kind of old hands at remote working in some respects. We were lucky insofar as in our business we've collaborated overseas with a lot of teams over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years. I mean, for example, we all had Zoom accounts before COVID-19, so that marks us out as we had Zoom before the rest of the world. But what was different was that in the past, for example, we have a client maybe in Geneva, we have a software development team in India, we have a marketing team in the States, and we're in Dublin, and we would be communicating with each of these people at different times of the day, and it all worked fine, swimmingly. We had a protocol in place to deal with that. But now what's different is that the we part of that equation is now completely dispersed. So I'm in my living room, the other designer is in his living room, the coder's in another living room. Everybody is not so much just separated, but isolated. And
Yeah.
I think in the creative world, we gain so much that we possibly didn't really appreciate before. But
Sure.
a lot of what we gained is from being around each other. You know, it's that water cooler moment where you're kind of like you're struggling with a
Yeah.
problem, and you know, your colleague comes up to you at the water cooler, and you start talking about what you're currently doing, and even though he's working on a completely different project, you know, he has ideas, and that sparks ideas in you, and you go back to your desk and you're thinking, oh, it's something I can try here. That
Yeah.
doesn't happen anymore, and you can't replicate that remotely. It's not
Yeah.
easy, you know, it's not feasible. So I
Yeah.
think that is hugely challenged for us. Now we're working on it. We're working on ways in which we can, you know, use digital tools to maybe try and recapture some of the creative spark. But you know, we've used like cloud-based whiteboards and Zoom and Slack channels and all of this stuff we have in place, but it's still
Yeah.
not the same.
Yeah,
It's
I
not.
have to tell you that most of the people that I talk to mention that it's really hard to collaborate that way. And some of them are from creative, some of them from other areas, but they all mention that it's not the same. And I think that in many cases, when something is taken from you, you understand the meaning and how important it is. And we see that the small things like really just chatting and having a conversation and sharing ideas and then maybe laughing together. It's something that you cannot really capture this way. And the energy between people is so essential in order to create something and to co-create. And it looks like very, like energy, but
Yeah.
there is something there.
Let me tell you,
And
like, you know, in our studio every Friday afternoon we have Beer Friday. You know, where
mm,
we have a beer together while we're working,
yeah, you're in
and
Dublin, you have to do it.
we have to do that. It's mandatory. But we've replicated this on Zoom, where we have Beer Friday on Zoom, and let me tell you, even Beer Friday doesn't work as well as Zoom.
Wow. It's a bit sad when you
You're
say
just
that.
drinking your beer in front of a webcam. It's not the same,
Yeah,
you know.
you're right. You're right. And when we think about it, why shouldn't it be the same? Like we see each other, we all sitting, we having like the same mindset more or less, but it's not working still.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it is interesting. It's that kind of it's the unexpected. I think one of the things like that I find myself doing a lot, like it's particularly, I think, difficult more so in the management roles than it is in the actual production side of doing my job. So it's great to have peace and quiet when I need to write a report or when I need to kind of, you know, do a piece of analytics, and you know, I can really focus on it and I get no distractions, and that's really good. But when it comes to kind of dealing with teams, I now find myself, you know, contacting each of the people beforehand and going, right, are you ready for this call? You know, what are we going to say? How are we going to say it? What are the points we're going to cover? Right, okay, let's have the call. We all hang up. We do the Zoom call with the client. We talk for an hour. After the Zoom call's over, you hang up. You have to go back to everybody again and go, okay, how did you think that went? When he said that, you know, what did you understand? You know, and you have to go through it all again. And sometimes with multiple different people. So,
Yeah.
you know, if I was in my studio, I would simply kind of stand up from my desk and go, right, guys, are we ready? And like,
Yeah.
you know, you just innately kind of, in the space of a couple
Yeah.
of minutes, you have it covered. You go into the room and we do our business. And afterwards, takes another couple of minutes and we're done. Whereas,
Yeah, I think that what you're saying is maybe related to these small hints that you get when you sit next to the other and you feel when he's comfortable or not, when he got it or not, when he agrees or not, and you cannot see it on Zoom. It's like
you,
you know this person, you work with him, so you know exactly what he's gonna say. But this way, you need to call him and really ask explicitly.
and there's a barrier to communication. Like when I say something on Zoom, you know, it's a very conscious, deliberate act. You know, I have to formulate it, and I am delivering a message to you. It's a
Mhm.
formalized way of communication. It's not the same as just having a chat to somebody, you know, when you kind of look around from your desk and you might say something, and the person can ignore you or can engage in
Yeah,
conversation. But when you do it over these kind of tools, it becomes much more, there's more intent. So you have to think about what you say, and you know, people are guarded about saying, I'm having a problem here. You know, like, you ever
yeah,
notice, I find when we have a Zoom call with somebody, it's almost overwhelmingly positive. Nobody ever
Yeah.
tell nobody ever
Yeah.
tells you.
You should come to Israel.
Right. Maybe it's just our outlook. But I talk to guys, so how's the job going? Everything is going great, and you might have to talk for an hour and a half before you realize things aren't quite as great as they
Oh,
might be.
I
You know what I mean? But nobody's telling you this sucks. I can't figure this out, because
yeah, I understand.
it's a weird way of communicating that message. So
Yeah, I understand. So how can you think, like, what are the design methods that could help in this kind of like new situation and this crisis?
well, I tell you, the one thing for sure, design loves a crisis. I
Yeah,
mean, design is a problem-solving tool, and in a crisis, the problems are more and more plentiful and bigger. So
right.
there's a lot to get your head around. And the other thing that you find in a crisis is that resistance to change disappears or melts away. So in our field, innovation in design, over the last few years, it's become very fashionable to talk about disruption. People are like, we must disrupt.
Yeah,
Disruption is where it's at. Let me tell you something for free. People don't like disruption, despite how trendy it is.
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I totally
I
understand.
mean, we work a lot in the healthcare sector in connected health. And if the one word you never use in a clinical context is disruption,
Yeah,
in fact, you don't even use the word innovation. Nobody wants to be innovative in healthcare,
yeah. So you're
right?
saying change management. What would you say?
Gradual change.
Gradual. Yeah.
Things will be better.
Evolution. Very, very slow. Slow.
Evolution is a
Yeah.
good thing. Things will be better, but your job will still be exactly the same. That's what they want
Oh,
to hear. Um,
right.
so people don't like to change the way they do things, and but in a crisis, we're forced to adapt to change more quickly than we possibly would at other times. And that is a great opportunity for designers. I mean, like the design process is really good at encapsulating a problem, quickly ideating potential solutions, validating whether those solutions may or may not work, and then evolving them, to the point where you get, okay, here's something that we can put out there in the world
Yeah.
that might work.
Yeah.
And then, you've got to sell that, and you've got to do all of the kind of messaging around it to get people to accept that. It's all much more immediate in a crisis because people don't have time to wait around. Let me give you another example. We do a lot of work in healthcare, and for the last kind of 20 years, they've been in Ireland. This is an Ireland specific thing. They've been trying to change the way that like a patient would get a prescription from a doctor and give that prescription to the pharmacist to get their medication. And up until February of this year,
It didn't
um,
work. No way.
yeah, no way.
Only the paper is with the signature that
You got to
nobody
have a
understands.
signature. You got to go to the doctor in person. They give you the prescription. You carry it in person to the pharmacist. They sign the book. You get your drugs, and that is the only way. And they had 100 reasons why it couldn't be changed. And then,
Yeah.
as soon as COVID-19 arrived, within 2 weeks, you can now email your doctor. Your doctor will email the prescription to your pharmacist, and your pharmacist will have your drugs delivered to your door, so you don't even
Wow.
have to go outside. And it took 2
Wow.
weeks for this to happen. So a crisis can really be an opportunity for things to change.
For sure. For
And,
sure. I totally agree with you. I
and
think that sometimes it works really well. Sometimes it's like it depends on the willing to really to make things better. In healthcare, you don't really have any other choice right now. You have to do it this way.
and maybe that's like that's what's good about it. Sometimes if you have freedom from choice, it allows
Yeah.
you to do more.
Yeah.
But look, the old way won't work anymore, so we
No.
gotta find something
No.
new.
But you can see the same in education, and they don't have any way to do it like as the way they did it in the past, and still they did not innovate so quickly as in health as you're describing. It's very hard for them to do it, and it takes more time. So it's not like they have to do it, but they don't have the way, and sometimes not even they are not willing to do it yet. It seems.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know in my experience of of the education sector over the last few months has been purely focused on my kids, and
Mhm.
dealing with homeschooling and like getting emails from the school, and using these apps that teachers have adopted to say, okay, we're going to do our lessons on this app and that.
Yeah,
And I mean, what I can say is that some schools and some teachers did it better than others, from what I can see. A lot of it was down to the individual, because
sure.
some teachers are more, they're younger, they're
Yeah,
more
they're
adaptable.
willing. They're willing to grow and learn, and then they have the capabilities. And yeah. So, what do you think are the skills and capabilities that are needed for someone to be a change maker to go forward?
Well, I mean, I think the key attributes are really, you need to be a good listener. I think if you're gonna be a leader in change, you need to be able to understand what is being said, who's saying it, get your head around the problem. You need to be analytical. You need to be able to make sense of all of the different things you hear, and try to kind of, in my head, the way I describe it is, you got to form patterns. You got to see where the patterns are, and understand, which ones are more important, to prioritize those patterns. And then you need to have patience. That's the other thing. I think to be an innovator, or to be, a good designer, you can't rush at solutions before you have all of the facts. So we try to train our guys, when we come to work, that about 50% of the problem is going to be is going to be like research, or going to be defining what the problem is. So a customer comes to us with a problem to solve. That's rarely the problem we actually get paid to solve at the end of the project. I
Right.
mean, things
Yeah.
change, because you start off, okay, you think this is the problem, but let's go and find out what the problem really is. And you do that by listening to people. You listen to the people in the business, you listen to the customers outside of the business, and you do a little bit of analytics yourself to understand, how those two mesh together. And then that becomes the new problem that you need to solve. But the other thing is, if you rush at it, the first couple of people you talk to will have suggestions, and will
Sure.
want you to follow a certain path. If you go down that path, you cut yourself off to what you might hear further into
Yeah.
the conversation when you talk to different people. And sometimes it can be hard not to jump to solutions, but it's a good practice, we find, to try and kind of park solutionizing, until we've finished with the listening part.
Yeah.
So let's gather the research, let's understand the problem, and when we're happy that this is the problem we're going to solve, then we start thinking about the solution.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. I think that in many cases, when you're thinking about listening, it means that you're curious. It means that you want to really learn more, and you know that you don't have the answer. You know that there is a question that you are eager to find out more about, and
Absolutely. And I
and
mean,
that's part of listening.
like we work across such a wide domain of industries, from like finance, from high tech, from healthcare, from product, you know. So I don't know anything about any of these areas. So,
Yeah,
I'm not a healthcare expert, but
right.
everything I do know, I've heard from listening to people, and so when I start working in a project, let's say in neurology, or in diabetes, or whatever the area might be, you immediately just have to kind of open up your mind to absorb as much information as you can from the people that you're talking to. And I don't know, I think if you really listen to them as people, when you talk to a nurse and a nurse explains the problem to you, if you're really listening to what she's saying, you can very quickly understand, this is the
Yeah,
nature of how this works, and this is what's important to her.
yeah.
And you do that for a couple of weeks, and you begin to have a pretty good feeling for how everything fits together.
Right. I think it's the fact that you need to address the people as humans and not just as potential clients or something. You need to solve something for them, and you need to understand them and then represent them in the process, which is very important. So I totally agree. This is one of the reasons that I always decide to stay like as a business owner. I never went into a company because I always learned each time I went into a project, into a domain. I learned so much, and it was so much more interesting for me.
Yeah, it's the only good thing about this job, is that it's never a dull
the,
day.
the only, I wouldn't say the only, I would say it's the best thing
It's the best
about
thing. It's the
yeah,
best thing.
yeah. So what do you think corporates need in order to innovate better? What's lacking?
Well, I mean, I think you just touched on it there, right? I mean, corporates, the key problem is really spending time with their customers. If you want to innovate, get out there and spend some time with your customers, the people who buy your product and use your product, and listen to what they think. Watch them try to use it, and understand their pain.
Right.
And what I found, like, I'm amazed, and it's the same conversation you have nearly every time. Corporate companies invite you in to talk about a job, and you sit down and you go, okay, first thing we're going to need to do is some research with your customers and understand how they feel.
I know. We
Oh,
already done it. We always know. We know what they
we,
want.
we, we know what they want. We don't want to go
Yeah.
asking. Our customers are they're too busy, and really what they're
Yeah.
saying is that we don't want to ask questions that we might get unflattering answers to. A lot of the time, corporate people, well, there's a couple of things. One is that they think our customers expect us to know the answers to these questions.
Right.
How can we
Yeah.
charge, $20,000 a license for this piece of software? If we're asking them what it should do,
Right.
they think
Yeah.
we should know this. They think we should be the ones telling them.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not the way the world works, right?
Sure. Not anymore. It worked this way maybe 15, 20 years ago. And now, it's not working anymore this way.
No, absolutely not. And so, we spend, usually there's a portion of every kind of client engagement where we have to kind of talk the corporate team around to the fact that it's a good idea to go and do research, and to, even if you think you've done research, we're going to do it again, because the questions we'll ask will be different. We're going to make it okay for your customers to tell us your product is dreadful, and to point out all the problems. And we're not going to penalize them for doing that. We're going to reward them,
Yeah.
and companies are nervous. What are you going to do? But we say, no, trust
Yeah.
us. When we do this exercise, your customers will come back and tell you you're the only company that's ever come and asked us what we think. I'm the guy who sits down and uses this product for 8 hours a day. No other vendor has ever come to ask me what I'd like to be doing here or what I'd like it to do. So it will reflect well on you, even if they don't like what you currently have. There's positive, it will become a positive experience, because and it's not because we try to make it that way. It's just, that's what I've witnessed over the years, that when you go to people and you listen to them, they really appreciate getting it off their chest. And sometimes what they have to say is not flattering, but it's the first step towards understanding what you really need to be doing,
Right.
And once you've got, like, the customers, needs directly from them, the rest, it's like half the job done. The rest is easy. It's just execution.
Right. And it's really important now because everything has changed and the market has changed, the client has changed, what they need has changed. So you need to go back to them, and maybe it worked like half a year ago. They were very happy with and satisfied with what you delivered, and right now they need something else, and you really need to know it.
It's all changed, and this is one of the challenging things for businesses around the globe right now, is that in the last 6 months, everything has been upended. And, in the past, for example, where people went and bought 2 coffees every day, on the way to work and on the way home, they're not doing that anymore. So you've got all these coffee vendors wondering, like, where's the future of my business?
Right.
And so they need to innovate. They need to. We've got a coffee space. We've got we have a store that does something. We need to find a way of getting people back in here, or at least sending coffee out of the store, or we won't exist anymore. And that problem is being experienced right across the board.
Yeah, it's in tourism, it's in education, it's in culture and art, and like in entertainment, so many domains, that in aviation, of course. So there are so many domains that need to really capture their essence again, and what are the value that they give, what the value they give their clients, and what they want to be.
and there are two reactions to this right now. I see it out there. One is, let's just stop everything and
Yeah.
wait until this is
Freeze.
gone, freeze, and
Yeah.
hopefully it'll all sort itself out. And
Yeah.
the other approach is to imagine that this reality is going to continue for quite some time, and if we don't change now, you know, we won't be around, in a
Right.
year's time to make those changes.
Yeah.
And if my advice would be the latter, be the second type of person, assume that this is going to go on for quite a while and make the
Yeah.
changes now, because I think it may happen that this is going to be with us for quite some time.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that most companies are doing the first thing. They're freezing and they're holding innovation and they're going back to their core services and products and trying to be as safe as possible. And I talked about this subject with most of my guests here in the show. And I wrote a book about it even. Like, it's going to go out in 2 weeks and it's called Innovating Through Chaos. And it's about that exactly. So
I need that book.
so you'll get it in 2
Okay.
weeks. So
Great.
tell us about interesting use cases that you help clients innovate.
Well, so we're a design company. So basically, innovating is what we do. I mean, day in, day out, it's part of the bread and butter of our
Sure.
business. But I think I was thinking about this question, and who do I talk about? But the pure definition of innovation is not, and it's often confused with inventing. So people think, innovation is when you do something new. It's
Yeah.
not. That's not what innovation is. Innovation is when you take something that already exists and you use it in a different way. Okay, so it's applying a different, service around something that's already that's innovating. Okay,
Yeah, it's like
so
reinventing in a sense, like
yeah,
reinventing the value of what you're doing.
it doesn't need to be brand new. Like, for example, one of the greatest most innovative companies of all time was Apple. They still are. They've never really invented anything. I mean, all of the technology they use has been taken from other sources, just put together really, really well. And in the act of doing that, they created something brand new.
Sure.
But not inventing per se. But we did a piece of work a few years ago, which I like. For Roche, who are a big pharmaceutical company, and one of the areas in which Roche is active is in diabetes. They're actually the global #1 brand in diabetes care.
So now they have very good business. Everybody got fat here in the lockdown, so it's good for them.
Yeah, myself included. So the difficulty, I suppose, with the diabetes market is that, or the unique thing about it is that. So if you're a type 2 diabetes patient, you will go to a clinic, you will be seen by a nurse, and she will give you a blood glucose meter to measure your glucose levels. And then you get the little test strips on prescription every month. You get a new file of them. So the meter, you're given this for free in most countries. It's a freebie. They're quite expensive. Some of them, they can, some of the more complex ones can cost up to $100 to make. So it's a sizable investment by the company that made that in you as the patient, and we're hoping you're going to buy our test strips so we make that money back. Okay. And this is how the market works. And unfortunately, then, if you're a diabetes nurse, you have a sales rep coming into you every day with another box of free products to give out, right? So they're pushing the free products to the nurses. And so there's so many of them. Nurses, can't get rid of them. They can't actually dispense them as quick as they get them. And the second problem, of course, is that for nurses, they haven't got time to train patients how to use things. So sometimes the best products are the ones that take a little bit longer to train. And nurses, while they would like to give you the best product, they don't want to run the risk of your session eating into somebody else's session. So they tend to kind of make judgment calls based on the lowest common denominator. So they give the simplest product to every patient because it's reliable, it's quick to train, and it's easy, and it won't cause any unexpected delays. Okay, so Roche are #1, but what they found was that almost 50% of the blood glucose meters that they produced were never activated. They were never even taken out
Wow.
of their boxes. Okay.
Oh, very,
Now,
very sad to hear.
yeah, and not good for lots of
No,
different reasons, like
not good at all. No.
environmental, financial, everything, right?
Anyway, yeah.
And of course, if it was a normal kind of market, you'd look at the price point and you would look at, like what can we do to make this product more attractive? But in the healthcare environment, those dynamics don't really work. Now, the US market is a little bit like that. It does have a consumer side to it, but generally speaking, around the world, it's not so much. So Roche asked us to kind of look at these products and say, tell us why people aren't using them, and then tell us how to fix it, right?
Yeah.
And of course, the big problem or the big constraint was that all of these products are regulated by the FDA, so we can't change any of them. We can't change it because we'd have to go back through the regulatory cycle.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and it takes long until they really give you all the approvals, and it's really, really long process.
Absolutely. So
and expensive one.
Exactly. So we talked to nurses, we talked to patients, and very quickly we found out the problem was essentially for nurses, it's time consuming to train, and it's perceived as being a complicated product or complex products. And for patients, the first time experience with the product was really poor because it's slightly more difficult to use or more complex than other products, and their first time experience was not successful. So they would immediately return to the nurse and want more training or more help. And this, of course, compounded the nurse's kind of perception that I shouldn't have given that product to that patient. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was in part the easy bit. The hard bit was how do we solve it without fixing the product itself?
Right.
So we could change everything around the product, not the product. So, we looked at the packaging, we looked at the discovery process. When you open the box, how is the product presented? The order you find things. We looked at ways in which we could package the product in a box so that when the nurse opened it, it was all ready to train. Whereas currently the nurse would have to spend about 2 or 3 minutes assembling the product, getting rid of some of the extra materials, making everything nice and tidy for the patient to comprehend, putting everything in the case and all of that. So we looked at ways in which we could deliver the product ready for training. And then from the patient perspective, we just designed really good instructions that we tested and tested and tested until we had got rid of all of the misunderstandings and, made it 100% clear. And all of this was tested as we went so that we were able to stand over all changes to the packaging and to the instructions and to the kit with empirical kind of metrics to say, look, we have reduced like the number of mistakes by 20%. We've reduced it by a further 12%, and so on, until you get to a point where people aren't having any errors or aren't having any problems. As part of the process of doing all of this, we also spent a couple of days in a call center in Germany where they deal with the patient queries. And I noticed, like just listening in on calls, I noticed before the nurse who's working in the call center, before they're allowed to hear any details of the call, the patient must identify the serial number on their meter and a special lot number on the strips. Okay, and these are long numbers and quite difficult to find. So after about the third call, where the operators, no, not that number, no, the one under the logo, no, to the left of that, all happening kind of on the phone, I just kind of took my headset off and said, is every phone call like this? Do you spend like the first 2 minutes of every call trying to get those two numbers? And just, oh my God, every call is like this, What if we just redesigned the label so that it was really easy to find those numbers,
Yeah, makes sense.
It took us 20 minutes to redesign the label. We did an A/B test where we worked out how much quicker it now would be, right, with like a new label versus the existing one. And then we got some clever person in the call center to tell us exactly how much a minute of call center time would cost. And we did the sums, we worked out that over the space of 3 years, we could save $1.5 million in call center time just by changing that label, which took 20 minutes, And that is like, the essence of innovation, where all we did was redesign a label.
Yeah.
But the impact of that, when you've got such vast volumes, is like significant,
Sure.
and then
And
we went on. We continued working with them, and we went through a kind of a 3-year period where we changed those instructions into video instructions, and we animated it, and they were done in like for 110 different countries, 42 different languages. So now you can walk into a pharmacy in the US with your smartphone. You can pick up a Roche meter off the shelf, scan the QR code, and you immediately have a nurse appear on your phone telling you, this is how to use this product and this is why you should use it. Like, I mean, in the
yeah,
patient's hand, and all of this, like no other company in the diabetes market has ever done any of this kind of work. So it's a
yeah,
unique thing, and it's generated huge amount of goodwill among nurses that Roche have gone to the trouble of understanding their pain and are making the training tasks easier for them. And
yeah,
the final kind of, I suppose, coup de grace was when we finally finished the project. Roche interviewed internally for engineers to fill the role that we had created in the company. So they actually changed their organizational structure to include a user experience and out-of-box experience manager that would look after all of these different kind of facets of the kit, and make sure that the customer experience was being maintained into the future, which, I thought, well, that's pretty cool. We've changed the
yeah.
way they work.
Of course, that's a great story. That's a great use case. So I want to thank you for your time. It's been such a pleasure. I really enjoyed talking to you. So where could people find more about the front end, about you, and contact you?
Frontend.com. www.frontend.com. It does exactly what it says on the tin.
Yeah. So thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone. Itamar Laron told us that it's a great talk, and several others. So thank you for joining us. And to all the change makers out there, thank you for joining me. Have a great day. Bye bye.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you.